Hi, I'm Dan, this is That Midlife Crisis Motorcyclist, and this is the BSA Gold Star, a newish bike based on a classic old one. But not any old bike, as it turns out. No, although I am still new to all this and I don't have a great knowledge of classic British motorbikes, I do have a book which cost me £1 in a charity shop, and that tells me that the original Gold Star, the 1950s, was quite the bike to have, especially among the kind of ton-up boys with their slick greaseback hair, their kind of repurposed flying jackets, and their general come and have a go if you think you're hard enough attitude. Quite a cool origin story for the bike, it's got to be said. In terms of BSA itself, it is of course another classic British motorcycle brand reborn under Indian ownership, and the bike itself is a kind of rose-tinted reinvention of that classic Gold Star. It certainly looks authentic in its kind of retro vibe and the kind of way it's been put together, although the engine at the heart of it is a little bit more modern than you might imagine. It's a 652cc single, and although it looks air-cooled, it is in fact liquid-cooled, as you can see from the radiator on the front, and it's got a twin-cam 4-valve head, so yeah, a little bit more up-to-date than you might have expected. It puts out 45 horsepower, which is of course bang on the limit for A2 licensed riders, which is pretty cool, and the bike, as you see it, costs, as I record this, about £5,500 plus on the road, which puts it in a very interesting position because the Royal Enfield 350 singles that you might consider rivals for this are about £1,000 less, but quite a bit less powerful, and Royal Enfield 650 twins are about another £1,000 more expensive, despite the fact that the BSA has similar power. So that's quite an interesting proposition, isn't it? But here comes Honda with that pesky GB350S, which I tested on the channel recently, and very successfully riffs on this same kind of retro air-cooled single vibe. Okay, it's only got half the power of this bike, but it costs just £4,000, and well, it's a Honda, isn't it? So that's a very, very interesting proposition, and it seemingly puts the likes of BSA and Royal Enfield into a slightly difficult position, doesn't it? Is the BSA's incredible heritage enough to make it worth the extra money though? Well, let's go for a ride and find out. So, does the BSA Gold Star live up to that famous reputation as a hero bike for the ton-up boys and a hot motorbike back in its day? You know, this was a properly celebrated machine for its speed and power. Obviously a few years have passed since then, but perhaps in the modern day the more pressing question is it still relevant with the arrival of the Honda GB350S, which I've ridden very recently? Well, we'll get to that, but I think probably the more interesting or relevant comparison is how it goes against those Royal Enfields, and seemingly offers the kind of character and single cylinder purity of the 350s, but with the performance, on paper at least, of the 650 twins for quite a bit less money. And that's an interesting sales pitch, isn't it? Now, I have to confess, I have still not ridden a Royal Enfield 350 single. I'd very much like to, but I do know the 650 twins very well, having lived with an Inceptor, ridden the Continental GT Classic 650 twin, shotgun, I think all of them now. So I do have a good frame of reference to compare this engine with those, and it's interesting. It's actually got a fraction more torque, which I suppose isn't too unexpected given it's a 650 single, 652cc single. So you know, it's quite a big thumper of an engine, and it's got a decent level of performance there. And then the other thing that's surprising, it's quite how smooth it is as well. You know, this is not a kind of crude, old-fashioned engine, but then it is a liquid-cooled, modern design, really. So it's not an old-fashioned engine, and nor does it behave like one. So that's quite a pleasant surprise, that for all its kind of classic looks, this Gold Star does have decent performance. Perhaps not up to the level of its 50s inspiration, but and certainly not in comparison to other bikes, but it feels like a nice level of performance for a bike of this nature. And you can, you know, on a summer's evening like this and on a twisty road, it's got enough. And it's got a bit of single cylinder burble as well, but as you can probably hear, it's impressively refined, and it doesn't send too many vibes through the seat or get the mirrors fizzing. So I think you could actually rack up some miles on this bike in relative comfort, and it's got enough performance that you could do a kind of, you know, a proper cross-country ride that might be a bit of a bind on an Enfield 350 single. It's interesting how the performance compares with the Honda, actually, which on paper only has half the power of this, but I don't remember the Honda feeling like it would be that much slower than this, which is curious, isn't it? But you know, numbers on a spec sheet are always only half the story with a motorbike, aren't they? It's how it feels on the road that counts. But certainly, if you're looking for reasons why you might spend the extra money on the BSA, that extra horsepower is one of them. Now let's take a little kind of back lane diversion. Well, this is what's fun on bikes like this, is that you know, you probably wouldn't take a little back road like this on a big bike or a modern bike necessarily, but when you're a classic looking machine like this, you just feel inspired to take these little shortcuts and roads less travelled, and it's really good fun. I enjoy just kind of pottering around on this bike. Well, I was going to tell you, well, the gearbox is really nice. It's a 5-speed on this, which is probably sufficient given that it's a torquey engine, so it's got enough to lean on, and it's got a really nice kind of positive action as well. I like the way it changes gears, so it's quite good fun to kind of row it up and down through the gears. I'm enjoying that. Brakes and suspension, well, they're up to the job. You know, the bike is not fast. It's not something you're going to be thrashing around the corners, but it's got enough to be going on with, and I'd say it probably rides a little bit better than a Royal Enfield, perhaps. A little bit of judder through the fork. I don't know if that's just because this one needs a bit of adjustment, or they all do that, sir, but that's a little bit disappointing. As are the tyres, which are Pirelli Phantoms, I think they're called, which I know from the Interceptor. And they're a strange tyre, because you'd think, being a Pirelli, that, you know, a big name brand and all that kind of thing, they'd have decent grip levels, but I remember this from the Royal Enfield. It's like they've got a very strange, almost kind of, it's almost like they're kind of V-shaped in section, so it gives it this kind of weird, kind of teetery kind of sensation. So when you tip it into a corner, it's almost like it kind of falls onto its sidewall, which is a little bit disconcerting. Certainly not confidence inspiring, let's put it that way. And I know from experience of the Interceptor that they are somewhat sketchy in the wet as well. So, I mean, this isn't the kind of bike you're going to be riding on rainy days, but it is a consideration. And it does just kind of knock a little bit of a dynamic edge off the bike. Not that it's a bike that you're going to be kind of cranking over into the turns and things like that. And I guess when it's parked up, the Phantoms have that kind of period look, but yeah, they're just not, from previous experience, just not a very nice tyre. And if I've got another moan, it's this unbelievably ugly USB charging port here on the handlebars. What is that all about? I can't imagine this is the kind of bike where you're going to be clamping your phone to the handlebars for navigation and things like that. And it just sticks out like a sore thumb on the bars, doesn't it? It's not in keeping with the rest of the bike at all. So, you know, just keep your phone in your pocket and be done with it. But apart from that, and you could probably take it off pretty easily, couldn't you? Apart from that, this is a charming bike. Good fun to ride. And a perfect accompaniment to a summer's evening like this. So that was the BSA Gold Star. What a perfect evening to be riding it. Really, really good fun. I've enjoyed it a lot. But how does it compare with some of the other bikes like this that you might be considering? Well, against the Royal Enfield 350s, I think this is probably the more appealing choice because it's got a lot of the same looks and kind of style about it, but it's just got that bit more power, which might open up longer rides, you know, rides on faster roads and things like that you probably wouldn't consider on the Enfield 350. Compared with the Royal Enfield 650 Twins, it's an interesting comparison because it's cheaper, but it's got a similar amount of power. I'd say the Enfield 650 engine has probably got a little bit more about it. It sounds better. It's a proper air-cooled engine, so it's a bit more authentic on that score. So I think probably if it came down to the choice between the BSA and an Enfield 650, it will come down to the money. The BSA is cheaper, but probably as much down to brand loyalty. You know, which of these kind of classic British brands do you most identify with? The real problem, as I've been saying throughout the video though, is the Honda GB350S, which on the road feels a lot more like a modern bike in terms of its suspension, brakes and tyres, so you can actually chuck it around and enjoy it a bit more. It's down on power, but I think I enjoyed riding the Honda more. It's just, you could kind of, yeah, you could have fun on it, whereas the BSA and the Royal Enfields, you feel that you have to make allowances for things like the tyres, the brakes, suspension and things like that. They're great fun and they look good, and you know, they've got a huge kind of authenticity about them, again, and keep coming back to that word, but the Honda is just a bit more usable and a lot cheaper as well. Just keep coming back to that. It's cheaper than any of them, and I think if you were thinking of a bike that you could use as a daily, the Honda's got some great advantages as well, whereas these bikes have got, you know, loads of chrome, they look fantastic, but it's not a bike you're going to be using for the daily commute through the town and things like that. Whereas the Honda, most of it's black painted, it's got cast wheels, it doesn't have spokes and things like that. So realistically, you could use that Honda all year round as a city bike or something like that, and it's cheap enough to treat it as such. And then on a day like this, you can come out and enjoy it on the lanes as well. So yeah, I do think that GB350S is a problem for bikes like this, but what do you think? Do you think the authenticity of the BSA brand, like Royal Enfield's, counts for more than the Honda's affordability, or would you just save the money and go for the GB350S? Let's have a chat in the comments about that. I'd love to know your thoughts. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. If you did, please hit like. If you're not subscribed already, then please do so. And for now, I'll say goodbye, thanks for watching, and ride safe.